Tonight is deeply personal to me in a lot of ways. I am born and raised in Danville, grew up at CPC. I did ministry with some of the organizations that are in the room. I have served hot chocolate with YWAM. I've been to Bay Area Rescue, everybody, amen by myself. Everybody, I've been to Bay Area Rescue Mission. Okay. There's people that I know from decades ago, people that I've been associated with. It's really fun for me to get to serve the Bay Area that I love so much. I want to tell you just a little bit about National Christian Foundation. We're a 40-year-old organization, and we were started by three gentlemen. Terry Parker, who's still on our board to this day. Ron Blue, many of you may have heard of Blue Trust, Ron Blue Trust. And then Larry Burkett. And if you don't know who Larry Burkett is, the way I describe Larry Burkett is he was Dave Ramsey before Dave Ramsey was cool. And those three gentlemen saw an opportunity to get more money into the kingdom, and they put their heads together and they launched National Christian Foundation, which at its core is a donor-advised fund platform. Now that's a mouthful, and I want to make sure that everybody in the room knows what a donor-advised fund is, just basically before we get into tonight, because that's one of the things that we're talking about. A donor-advised fund, I want you to think of it like a charitable checking account, right? If you think of your checking account, your paycheck comes in, amen. Oh, that usually gets an amen, right? Your paycheck comes into the checking account, and then from there, you pay your mortgage, you pay your rent, you go to the movies, Starbucks, whatever. All your expenses come out of that checking account. And most Christians view their giving like one of those transactions that comes out of their checking account. And usually it happens at the end of the month rather than the beginning of the month. Come on, somebody. Tonight, I want you to put your donor goggles on, and I want you to think about your major givers. I want you to think of them and how they are doing their charitable giving. The Donor Advised Fund is the fastest growing charitable vehicle in America. You need to be aware of it. You need to understand it to a minimal degree. Many of your ministries have probably received checks from Donor Advised Funds. National Christian Foundation is not the only one. But you need to be aware of the power that they possess. And so we're going to talk through that a little bit tonight. You're going to learn some tips, tools, tricks, things that are on the technical side, but we're also going to hear a pretty compelling story from Verne Murray, his own giving strategy. It really is, though, for me, personal. This is, I have a 15-year career as a pastor. So this is my ordination service here on your left, and a picture of me preaching one of the things I love to do the most. And then up in that upper right-hand corner is my brother holding a microphone praying for me at my own ordination service. I have been in staff meeting, and somebody had a great idea on how to reach people for Jesus. Raise your hand if you've been there. Somebody had a great idea. And somebody else in that staff meeting had to be the bearer of bad news, that there's not enough money to do that thing, right? And somewhere in my mind, I've kind of always fundamentally rejected that thesis because I believe God owns it all. The resources are out there. It is a matter of really and truly pairing up people's passions and their purposes with their purses. You know what I'm saying? We just have to help connect the dots for people, and that unlocks exponential levels of generosity. So I want you to think of your target audience tonight. This presentation is a tool that I want to offer to you to use with your donors, a version of this. You're going to hear a lot of different things, but a version of this that you can use with your donors. And when I say your donors, I don't just mean any one of your donors, though I think it's helpful for every single Christian to hear, okay? A lot of people talk about donor pyramids. I like to talk about donor Christmas trees because all the good presents come from the tree, right? So on a donor Christmas tree, at the bottom, you have your 80% of your givers that do 20% of the giving, right? The good old 80-20 rule. Maybe that's the $50 a month recurring giver, right? And then in that middle section of the Christmas tree, you've got your, what I would call the backbone givers, right? They're the ones that are given a more above and beyond that, and they're giving it consistently, and man, you know them, you're in a relationship with them, you're thankful for them. And then as you keep climbing the Christmas tree, you get to the top of the Christmas tree, the high-capacity Christian who's supporting your ministry and other ministries, and they're doing it at an extravagant level. And then, just maybe, your ministry has an angel at the top of their Christmas tree. right? Now, National Christian Foundation, our bread and butter is the top of your Christmas tree and those angels. They are the ones that are sophisticated in their philanthropy, which is a wild concept to even think about. They'd be on speed dial with the executive directors sometimes, or they don't want to ever hear from the ministry. There's those ones too. They just want to fund what God is doing. NCF specializes in helping those high capacity givers with their giving strategy and with tax efficient giving strategies. And so that's who we are and what we do and who we serve. And tonight's presentation is called Transformational Giving. Verne Murray, who you're going to be hearing from, Verne and I have known each other for a couple of decades now. Again, CPC is where that started. I had his son in the youth group that I was an intern at. Our families have known each other for a long time. And between that and the number of faces that I see in the room tonight, this place, this valley, that view, Mount Diablo and on the other side, I just know tonight's not an accident. Like if you're here and you stumbled in or you got invited yesterday, it's not an accident that you're here. I actually think God has something that he wants to show you and teach you and grow in you. And he has something for me, because every time I hear Verne's story, it nudges my heart a little bit closer to Jesus' heart. And that's where we all want to be, right? So would you put your hands together for my friend, Verne Murray.
Thank you, Dan. Well, good evening. It's great to be with all of you. As I look out, I see a lot of familiar faces, some new ones, but welcome. And it's a delight to be here. Tom, as always, it is a privilege for me to partner with you. We have been partners for many years now since the master's program. And so thank you again for your extravagant generosity in inviting all the people you know to come. I think I could have got a few of them to come, but I don't think I could have got all of them to come like you did. So thank you. Anyway, why are you here? Why are you here? You're going to hear my story, our story, because my wife's in the back there, our giving journey tonight. But I really want you to put on a pair of glasses where you're looking at this through the eyes of your donors. Because that's the key. That's what Dan was talking about, was giving you guys a tool, giving you a gift where we will partner with you when this is all done. If this is something you would like to do with some of your donors, we will partner with you and put a presentation together. So anyway, as I said before, I'm going to share our journey from transactional giving to transformational giving. Well, it began about 41 years ago when we got married. So when Melody and I first got engaged, we had been given some counsel that we should probably get some counseling, because I was a brand new Christian and she was a very mature Christian. And we did get that counseling and it was helpful, but they never talked about money. And so about 3 weeks after our honeymoon, I came home and Melody's sitting on the end of the bed with her checkbook open. And I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm writing our tithe checks." And I said, "Okay, what's a tithe check?" So I'm a brand new Christian. So she takes me to the Bible and she shows me what tithing is all about. And I said, "Okay, I'm good with that. That works for me." Okay, I said, "Can we do this at the end of the month? When the bills are paid?" And she looks at me and she says, No, we're a first fruits giver." I said, "Well, what does that mean?" She takes me back to the Bible. I said, okay, I'm a little slow, but I'm getting it. And then I said, "Well, what happens at the end of the month if we don't have enough money to pay our bills?" She says, "Well, God will provide." Like, what do I do with that? So that began our giving journey. And then she looked me in the eye and she said, "I not only tithed on my paycheck, I tithed on your paycheck." And at the time, she made more money than I did for a very short period of time, but she did. So anyway, that was the beginning of our giving journey. And I didn't resent it. It was just, I felt it as a responsibility, as a duty. But honestly, it was pretty transactional. So I came to understand that giving is not what God wants from me. Giving is what God wants for me. It's a hard issue. if you're donors, if we understand it, what God really wants is our heart. As a matter of fact, let's just speak truth for a minute. Our Father owns a cattle on 1,000 hills. Do you think if you don't tithe or I don't tithe or we don't give that his will be thwarted? I don't think so for 1 second. Like Dan said, it's a divine appointment. So God doesn't really need our money or our stuff. He knows that's the key, the pathway to our heart. So in 1973, Howard Dayton cataloged all 2,350 verses in the Bible that talk about money and possessions. And you guys probably already know this, but that category of money and possessions is more than 2 times more than any other two categories in the Bible. So I thought, I think God kind of knew what we'd be struggling with. Anyway, we're all on a journey. We're all on a giving journey. We're in a different spot at a different time. And, us at NCF, we're here to kind of support your donors on that journey. So as you might imagine, after the little tithing conversation, I think it was a few months later, I was in a Bible study with a man named Bob Shank. I don't know how many of you know Bob, Priority Living. He's a legend in Southern California. He has just done so many incredible things for Christian ministry. And I was lucky to be in a Bible study with him. Again, 40 years ago, he was just kind of getting started as I was. And he said, we're going to do a little exercise today. He said, we're going to do an exercise called, How Big is Your Box? I'm like, what do you mean, how big is your box? He said, well, if you don't stop and define what success looks like for you, how will you ever know when you get there? How will you know to stop and thank God for what he's done for you? He said, it doesn't mean your box can't change. Another child comes along, a job change, but if you don't stop and do that, so Melody and I actually stopped and did that. What would success look like for us? I'll share one little tidbit with you. For us back then, if we could have one $10,000 T-bill, we were set. It was done. That was back then. So it's just a wonderful process, because what we kind of learn through that sometimes is to start to think about maybe it's not how much we give. Maybe it's about how much do we keep. Maybe looking at it a little differently. Does God continue to bless us to raise our standard of living? Or does he maybe want to raise our standard of giving? It's an interesting conversation. There's not really an answer for it. Well, as you might expect, as we're going through this journey, there was yet another test to come. So I was working for an investment bank, Deutsche Bank, a company that I had been a part owner and had been sold to Deutsche Bank. And I was working for them, and there was a 1-year retention bonus. It was a significant 6-figure number that was due to me for staying a year. And that I had kind of figured out that I didn't want to work for the Germans anymore. I kind of wanted to go to work for the Swiss, chocolate and the whole thing. And so I was going over to Credit Suisse, join them, and I told them, I said, look, I've got this retention bonus coming, and I want to stay till I get that, and I'll come over and join. They said, well, we want you to come now. We'll pay you the retention bonus. I said, cool, that's great. And then, I started looking at the timing with the contracts and all that, and I thought, there's maybe a 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000 chance that I could get both bonuses, just depending how the timing goes. So I made a little deal with God. I said, if I get both bonuses, I'm going to give one to you. God's like, cool, okay. So things go on, and I give my notice. And as you would expect, I was escorted out the door by a couple security guards with my box of goodies. End of story, 1 bonus. No. I get a call the next morning from New York, said, Mr. Murray, we don't think you read your contract. You are required to give us 30 days notice. So you will not be going to the office. You will not be contacting your clients, but you will be giving us 30 days notice. Enjoy your vacation. Well, Deutsche Bank wasn't paying the retention bonus. The company that sold to Deutsche Bank was paying it. So lo and behold, 2 bonuses. Awesome. Well, I forgot one thing. I'm a W-2 guy. I've always been a W-2 guy. They took out more than half in tax. So I'm like, God, can we renegotiate a little bit here? Because, I didn't, this is the end of November. I'm like, Anyway, big mistakes. Anyway, but God's answer was, no. Are you a guy who gives on your net or your gross? Well, God, we give on our gross. Well then, okay, got it. So we got that all worked out, got that solved, Melody and I. Well, now the next problem is, I've got this chunk of money, and it's December, my busiest month of the season, and how am I going to figure out, I got to give the money away this year because I need the tax deduction to offset the income. How am I going to figure out who to give this money to? And by the end of December, not possible. So I picked up the phone, called an old friend of mine, Paul Neff in Southern California. Paul is a private foundation called Servant's Heart Foundation, sorry. Servant's Heart Foundation. I said, Paul, can I park this money in your foundation? I need the tax deduction this year. And then next year we'll figure out where to give it. And once again, he said, no. I said, what do you mean no? He said, well, why don't you just go online and open a donor advised fund with the National Christian Foundation? I said, no idea what you're talking about. Literally got online with him on the phone, and 30 minutes later, I had my donor advised fund with the money deposited. So that began my journey with NCF. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what I think some of the benefits of a donor advised fund are. We talked about it a little bit. One of the cool things is the moment you put the money in, you get the tax deduction. That's great. The other thing that works very well with it is security. If somehow you have given to a 501c3 and their paperwork is not in order with the IRS, and a year, 18 months later, you get a letter in the mail. Remember, you guys are thinking as donors now, because I know all your paperwork's in order. You get a letter in the mail that says, I'm so sorry. Your charitable organization was not in good standing with the IRS, and so your deduction is denied. And so you lose the deduction, and so you owe the tax. Oh, by the way, plus the penalties and interest. With NCF, you don't have that issue. That's our responsibility. You also get privacy. You might want to support something that's politically sensitive that you wouldn't want out in the public, but you're passionate about it. On our platform, you check one box, everything's private. The check just says the National Christian Foundation. So it gives you tremendous, tremendous privacy. But also, I like the convenience because Melody and I now do virtually all of our giving through our NCF Donor Advised Fund. So I remember during tax season, we used to be like, here's the receipt and here's the canceled check and all that stuff. And now all we do is we click one button online with NCF. It's a printout. We hand it to the accountant. So it gives you makes it very, very convenient. But our single greatest tool, and it's not up there, Dan's going to talk about it a little bit later, is asset giving. We are rock stars in the asset giving space. And this is where you as ministries can start to think about the difference between addition and multiplication is asset giving, because that's the key to unlocking. So those are some of the benefits of a donor advised fund. Dan will talk a little bit more about that. Well, then I went for a jog. And most of you that know me in this room know I don't jog. I don't run. I barely walk. Okay, so what is a jog? Jog stands for a journey of generosity. It's an event hosted by Generous Giving. It's all funded by the McClellan Foundation and other folks, so you never pay to attend. It's an overnight event, typically 22 to 24 hours, where you gather with like-minded believers, usually someplace nice, and you have honest and open conversation about what God has to say about our money and possessions. You get to hear encouraging stories every time the Holy Spirit does some significant work. And so I got introduced to this, I think about 12 years ago. Our senior pastor, Scott Farmer, he called me once and I said no. He called me twice and I didn't respond. But when your senior pastor calls you 3 times, you respond. So Melody and I went to that, and we had a fabulous time. I'll never forget Todd Harper, who was our facilitator and also the president of Generous Giving. At the end, Melody was right there with me. I was practically weeping because I said to Todd, Todd, if I had known about this 20 years ago, it would have changed my life. I said, that wouldn't have changed our giving. We were a young family. We were trying to save for college and save for retirement and pay off debt and do all the things that young families do. But what it would have done is that weekend took me from giving being about obedience to joy. It just was this transformational shift. It's where I went from transactional. We went from transactional to transformational. And so as I've thought about it over the years, what is generous giving? Generous giving is a tool to help you discover your why. Now, as Christian leaders in the room, if you can help your donors discover, understand, crystallize their why, you've, in the most part, done your job. It's about the why. So, what I like to say to my friends sometime, I'm in a Bible study with Daryl Warner, great group of guys, and, I like to say sometimes, don't tell me what you believe. Show me your checkbook. That'll tell me what you believe. So anyway, generous giving is the why. What NCF is the how. We're the tool. God's got a hold of your heart now. You want to do something, but you need a new set of tools in your toolbox. And you want to do it, you want to turbocharge it or supercharge it. We are the tools in that toolbox. The when and who and all that is between you and God. We don't get involved in that. But the why, the hard issue is the why, and the how is where we can really partner with you. So anyway, God got a hold of my heart, but he wants to use my brain and not just my heart. So I'm going to give you, again, Dan will go through some of these tools. I want to give you my favorite example. Now, normally in a room like this, if I ask, how many of you have an IRA? I'd say 80% of the hands shoot up. Now, maybe not for you guys because you have different plans and stuff that you work with. And I say, well, as you know, with an IRA, the money goes in pre-tax. You don't pay tax on it. And then it grows in your account tax-free. But the catch is, when you go to take it out, the government wants to be paid their tax. And not just the tax on what's coming out of your IRA, the tax for your total income that year. So I'll say to them, if I could show you a way that you could get your money out of your IRA tax-free, would you be interested? Usually a pretty good number of hands go up and say, yeah, tell me how we do that. So let's just say you're making $150,000 a year. And you're a really generous person. And you're giving away, well, let's make the math easy, 33%. You're giving away $50,000 a year. You're a really generous person. Well, if you're making $150,000 a year, and let's just say you take $100,000 out of your IRA. So now your income has gone from $150,000 to $250,000, and you would pay tax on that. But if you take that same $100,000, you put it into your donor advised fund, your income's now back at $150,000 where it was before. So you paid no tax on that $100,000 of withdrawal that had all that gain in it, and every penny of it, because it went in pre-tax, would be taxable. But not only that, the $50,000, you've now pre-funded your giving for 2 or 3 years. But the $50,000 you were giving away in cash, you get to keep that for your family. Go on vacation, do something fun, or give more to the other things you're passionate about. So this is the key. This is going from addition to multiplication. And this is just scratching the surface. We're going to show you some models. Dan's going to show you some models. This guy's the best technician on the planet and the stuff that we do. He's going to show you some models that even to me still blow my mind. So anyway, a couple more personal examples. I have an attorney friend here, goes to CPC here in the Tri-Valley. And he's in his early 80s, and we get together once a month on Tuesday night when our wives go to book club. And we play dominoes, have a glass of wine, and have a little bit of dinner. So I like to talk about what I do and what I'm passionate about. And so I was asking him about his RMDs. And with IRAs, when you get to be 71 and a half, you have what are called RMDs, required minimum distributions. So if you've been socking it away instead of thinking, I'll just give that to my kids later on. No, the government says you got to take out X based on a life expectancy table. And you got to pay tax on it. But you also have this other tool called a QCD. QCD stands for Qualified Charitable Distribution. That means you can take out up to, if you're over 71 and a half, up to $100,000 out of your IRA, doesn't come into income, doesn't go back out as a deduction, goes straight to the charities of your choice. Here, my friend I won't say his name, never mind, because I'm in his town. Here my friend had been doing all of his giving after taking the money out from his RMDs, paying the tax, and giving after that. And he looked at me, and he's like in his early 80s, he said, and he's an attorney and a judge. No one ever told me that. No one ever told me that. So that kind of began the journey. I have one other, well, I have a lot of other fun stories, but just one more for now. Anyway, when I first got started with this, I was down in Mexico with a group from Danville, Todd Fitch and Todd Weinberg, to build houses, YWAM San Diego. And while I was down there, I got to know the president of YWAM, Sean Lambert, just a really great guy, and we got to talking again about what I'm passionate about, what I like to talk about. And I got home from San Diego, and I got a call from Sean about a week later, and he said, Verne, we've got a donor who wants to donate his 1969 classic Camaro. He thinks it's worth about $100,000. I said, he said, can we do that? And I said, well, let me check in with NCF, with my resources there, and give you the exact strategy. So I called my folks and talked to them there, and I called Sean back and said, you can absolutely do it, but you must do it it's not difficult, it just has to be done in a very precise manner. Because see, here's the challenge. The donor thought the Camaro was worth about $100,000. Had to get an appraisal, it appraised at 82. But here was the real issue. This was the original owner of this 1969 Camaro convertible, matching numbers. For you guys into cars, you know what that means. Anyway, so he had maybe on a good day, $15,000 to $20,000 invested in it, because he was the original owner, he'd done all the work. And if this wasn't handled properly, his $82,000 tax deduction would become a $20,000 tax deduction. I don't think he would have been happy with Sean and YWAM if that happened. So anyway, we went through the whole process. One of the things that had to happen was Sean had to hold on to that car for 1 year and a day. So Sean got to drive around San Diego, there he is, in his 1969 convertible Camaro, and then he put it up for auction after a year and a day, and it sold for over $100,000. So can you imagine something that had a basis of $20,000 and had it been sold, you'd pay tax, instead created an $82,000 tax deduction and produced over $100,000 for a charity. And that could be any one of you guys. So anyway, as I said before, giving is not what God wants from me. Giving is what God wants for me. At our house, Melody and I have been in our house for 31 years. It's a little weird. You have to go through the laundry room to get to the garage. And on the right side of our laundry room was a mirror. And on that mirror are two pictures. We have Sebly here from Centauro Village that we've been supporting since she was just a little girl. And she's nearly fully grown, and our children got to participate in that. And then on the right, we have Maria standing on the foundation of what will be her home in about 3 days when we were down in Baja. Not every day, but most days when I walk out and I look at those two pictures, I ask myself this question. Does God love me? Does God love me more than he loves Sebly and Maria? And the answer, biblically, is no. He loves us the same. If I hold that to be a biblical truth, and I do, then I have to ask myself this question. Why is it that I have so much? Why is it that I have so much? And they have so little. And the only answer, again, I can find in the Bible is God has counted me worthy of the stewardship that he's entrusted to me. You see, when I get to heaven, I don't think God's going to ask me how I did compared to my senior pastor, Tyler, or to Dan, or anybody else. I think he's going to say, Verne, what did you do? What did you do with what I gave you? And so this is part of the journey that you get to share with your donors to help them in that discovery. So anyway, I've never met an unhappy, generous person, and honestly, I've never met a formerly generous person. Now, the truth is, whether we like it or not, we live in a material world in the United States. It's unavoidable. You can't escape it. As a matter of fact, I think Madonna wrote a song about that, Material Girl in a Material World. I think she did. Anyway, there is an antidote for materialism, and it's generosity. It's the only antidote for materialism. So anyway, that's kind of our story of transformational giving, what God's teaching me now. You know, Melody and I still struggle. I mean, we love the Lord and we love the ministries in this room, but figuring out how to give from our assets, how to figure out how much is enough to leave your kids. So I want to leave you with one last story. So it's about NCF. So one of the things Melody and I used to do is, you know, we figured that our kids went through a kind of a season where all their friends were getting married. And we kind of figured they didn't need any more china. They didn't need any more silver. Nobody gives that stuff anymore. They didn't need any more towels. They didn't need any more pots and pans. So we started giving as a wedding gift a donor-advised fund with anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000, much more than we would ever spend on a wedding gift to them, with the idea of wanting to encourage generosity and teach generosity. Well, when our daughter got married, she got the $5,000. But I made a deal with her. Melody and I made a deal with her. We said, you know, we'll match everything you put in the first year with no limit. Well, they weren't making that much money, but those kids saved $16,000 in the first year of marriage, zapped me for another 16, plus the 5. So now, but what happened with that, what was so beautiful, what was so cool, is they now had $37,000. Now they said, we have significance. We now have a tool to make a difference. And it absolutely changed the trajectory of their giving. So anyway, I just want to share that with you. I want to invite Dan back up. He's going to give you some examples, and thank you for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed your dinner.
What a guy, what a guy. Thanks, Verne, for sharing your story. As much as Verne looks comfortable up here, that's been a lot of prayer, a lot of preparation, a lot of effort to get to a place where he's like, okay, God, I'm going to do it. So thanks for doing that. I want to show you a slide, and you don't have to understand it fully. I'm going to make it real simple for you. We are sitting atop the greatest wealth transfer in the history of humanity. It's been widely reported that over the next 20 years, estimates have been anywhere from $30 to $100 trillion is going to change hands. I mean, the boomer generation's turning 65 today. It is happening. And we have experienced this at NCF. If you back the timeline up 40 years, and we were to start over here, and it would just go like this, giving's gone up like this every year. And then a few years ago, we had our best year ever, and the market was up. And then the following year, the market was down, but we had our best year ever. And every year since then has been our best year ever in terms of total dollars of charitable giving that we're seeing across the nation. It's a train that's not stopping. And if you were to look closely at this chart, where it starts to what I call hockey stick curve, right? It says 2023, that's second column in. We are right at the beginning of generational wealth changing hands. And too much of it's going to go to the government and tax dollars if Christians don't get smart about how they do their charitable giving. Here's the problem. The typical giving in America at your organizations with your donors is probably at least 80% cash. I mean, it goes back to the offering plate of dropping the cash in the offering plate, right? It's this idea that whatever I get, $10 goes in, $1 goes out, or whatever math that people use. And the problem is, and this is true for me, it's probably true for you, my net worth is not in my checking account. It's in my assets. It's in the house that I bought 7 years ago that even though I thought I was buying at the top of the market, God bless California because it's doubled in value since then, right? Good for me, not good for the person who's trying to buy today. But you get the idea that net worth doesn't show up in my charitable giving, but it exists when I go meet with my financial advisor and they show me my percentage success rate on what I'm saving for retirement and investments. Now, I made the cash part of that pie on the left in red on purpose because every ministry that's competing for cash, they are swimming in the red ocean. That's a bloodbath. Everybody is asking for cash. I want to help you swim in the blue ocean, where the depths are endless of asset-based giving. As Verne alluded to, it goes from addition to multiplication. You've seen this slide already once. NCF, we love when people's hearts get transformed for generosity. It's why Verne is a part of our team and tells his story to anybody who will listen for 10 minutes. Seriously. But we don't want you to just give from your heart. We want you to also use your head. Verne talked about giving from an IRA. The easiest asset in the universe to give, that's an appreciated asset, and just so I'm using language everybody understands, there's two types of things in the world that we buy. There's things that go up in value and things that go down in value. You go to the Honda dealer, you buy a Honda Civic, you drive it off the lot, you paid 50 grand for it, you drove it away, put it for sale. It's not worth 51, people, it's worth 40, right? It depreciated, it went down in value, okay? But there's certain assets that people in America buy that go up in value. And Uncle Sam likes to tax those things when you go to sell them. So you can give appreciated stock, publicly traded securities is the language. If your organization and any nonprofit can receive stock, here's how it works. If I bought a share of Tesla for $100 and I held onto that share of Tesla for a year and a day, and now it's worth $1,000, okay? I hold it for a year and a day, it's called a long-term capital gains asset. And when you go to sell that, depending on your other income, say my church comes to me and says, hey, we'd like for you to make a generous donation. I go, okay, I got to go to my stock portfolio, go get the cash to give you. Remember, we're thinking your ideal top of the Christmas tree donors, right? They got to go liquidate some stock to write you a check. They're going to pay 30, 40, who knows what percentage tax, but in my equation, we'll just say they pay 40% tax. 400 of the $1,000 is going to go to the government, then they're going to write you a check for the balance, $600. And you would say, thank you so much. We already do. And they would feel great because they gave $600. And that's all fine and dandy, but the beautiful part of this idea is they could actually give that share of Tesla directly to the charity or to NCF, to a donor-advised fund, and people do this in large blocks of stock. And when they give that stock, they receive a fair market value tax deduction, in my math equation, $1,000 tax deduction for the value of the stock that they gave. NCF sells it the next day, the money clears into your account, all $1,000. We're a nonprofit. We don't pay taxes when we sell long-term capital gains assets like that. So we just took that $400 tax bill, and instead of paying it to the government, we converted it to ministry dollars. Amen? Everybody kept track with me on the math? That's good math, right? That's very good math. We want that equation to really work. It scales from there. We do it with real estate too, which is another type of appreciating asset. Say you bought the house in Tahoe, your donor bought that house in Tahoe for 100 grand back in 1985, and they've held on to it, and their kids vacationed there, and now it's worth $1 million. It needs a $50,000 roof. The kids moved to Timbuktu, and they're not using it anymore. I hear this more often than you think. And they want to sell it, but they don't want to pay the taxes on it. They're going to pay $300,000, $400,000 in taxes on this asset when they go to sell it because they have a low basis and a high gain. They could give a percentage or all of that property before a sale to National Christian Foundation. Say they gave 20% of it to NCF. We hold that 20%. When they sell the $1 million asset, instead of getting taxed on $1 million, they get taxed on 20% less, $800,000. They have a $200,000 fair market value tax deduction that they get to take into that liquidity event, and they have just robbed hell in the name of the kingdom because that money gets to go to the ministries that they care about, and they did it with government dollars. I like to think of it as a government funding ministry, which is a fun concept to think about. It scales from there. Business interests, the same principle applies. Say your wealthy donor started that business in their garage in 1985, and they have a $0 cost basis, and they did it right, American dream, and they grew it to a $10 million business. And they've hit 65 or 70 or whatever the number is, and they're retiring. They're going to sell the business. They're going to literally sell the family farm. They're going to have $10 million of long-term capital gains tax that they're going to have to pay on 40%, 50%, 30%, depending on what their other income looks like. It's wild, okay? And every entrepreneur in America knows this when they go into business, that when I sell my business, I'm gonna pay taxes on it. It's the cost of doing business in America. The dirty little secret is you can give shares of your company before the sale. And when you do that, you get a fair market value tax deduction for the value of the shares that you give. So same math. I give 20% of my company to NCF before the sale. Okay, we hold those shares. And by the way, we're holding a lot of business shares, like in the billions, okay? This is not something that only a couple people are doing. A lot of people are doing this across the nation. And when they give us the 20%, they get a $2 million tax deduction on that $10 million business. They sell the business, they have an $8 million liquidity event, and they have a $2 million tax deduction to take into that. It's magical. And I'm going to show it to you with numbers in a second. But here's what you need to know as an executive director or a development officer of a nonprofit. You need to understand the 3-to-1 rule of giving assets, okay? Really simple for you. The 3-to-1 rule. If I give you $1 when I die, which is when most generous people think they're going to make their biggest gift, it's going to be what we call contingent and deferred gift in their will and trust, meaning they can change it whenever they want, right? But they tell you, I'm going to give you a gift when I die in my will or my trust. I give you that gift, I give you $1, it counts for $1 in the real world value. If I give you that $1 while I'm alive, it counts for $2. The ministry gets $1 and I get $1 tax deduction. That's the IRS tax code at work. It's written to incentivize generosity in our nation. Here's the magic. When I start giving an asset, the ministry's getting $1, I'm getting $1 tax deduction, and instead of paying taxes, I can empty that tax bucket into the ministry bucket, and it becomes what we call a force multiplier for generosity. It starts at 3-to-1, it goes to 4, even 5x of impact. This is what Verne was alluding to when he said he went from addition to multiplication. And I'm using large numbers, relatively speaking, when I talk about a $10 million business or a $1 million vacation home. These are massive transactions that are happening across the country right now as people are selling their businesses, venture capitals at an all-time high. Things are moving, and like I said, the train is not stopping. So, what do you need to know? You need to know 3 numbers for asset-based giving. 3 numbers, okay? Ready? Here's the first one. What'd you buy it for? What's your cost basis is the technical term. Second number you need to know is what's it worth now? What's the fair market value of the asset that you bought? I told you about Tesla. I bought it for 100, sold it for 1,000. You heard about the Camaro, $18,000 tax basis, $15,000 tax basis. Fair market value was $82,000 appraisal value, okay? You need to know what you bought it for and what it's worth. What'd you buy the house for? What's it worth today? What'd you start the business for? What'd you buy the business for when you got into it? What's it worth today? And the third number you need to know for asset-based giving is how generous do you want to be? How much do you want to give? 10%, 20%, 50%, 100%. If you go on a journey of generosity, which Verne or I would love to take you on a journey of generosity. If you go on a journey of generosity, you're going to hear a story of Alan Barnhart, who gave away 100% of his $400 million company. Like wild. Because you can give it all away. Because God owns it all. Amen? So those are the 3 numbers you need. I want to show you the 3 numbers in action. Here's the 3 numbers in action. First, top line, stock, publicly traded securities. Okay? And there's variables that go into this. Whenever we're doing calculations like this, the beauty of NCF is we have the tools that we can sit down over coffee or lunch or breakfast with you, with one of your givers, and we can show them what we call the gift economics of what it looks like to give an asset. Why? What's the value proposition of giving an asset before I sell it, or giving a part of an asset? So in the case of stock, say you bought some stock for $20,000, held it for a year and a day, and now it's worth $100,000. If you were to sell that stock and give the proceeds away, awesome. But if you were to give the stock in advance of the sale, $19,000 more in that equation with that income goes to ministry instead of to taxes. That's the easiest asset. Real estate's that next one down. A $200,000 cost basis on $1 million asset. Hey, I really want to be generous. I'm going to give 50% of this asset away. I want to give a $500,000 value. And the donor thinks to themselves when they start, okay, I'm going to sell my $1 million house and I'm going to write a $500,000 check. Well, if they were to give that percentage of the property away before the sale, instead, $102,000 less, that top black number on the far right, comes out of the tax bucket, and $95,000 of it goes into their donor advised fund. You're like, Dan, what happens to the other $7,000? It goes to the family. It actually is incentivizing to give the gift in advance so that more money can get to the ministry. But I want to highlight the plus 95. That's on a $500,000 gift. Your gift value just went up by 20%. It's force multiplier, right? The next one down is called an S-Corp business interest. There's different kinds of businesses out there. Big companies that you might think of are C-Corps. Most small businesses are S-Corp businesses, or they're LLCs and they're filing as an S-Corp, okay? You don't have to understand tax law and everything like that, but what you do need to understand is that S-Corp businesses have a different tax structure than C-Corp businesses. And when I tell you NCF has the brightest gift planning attorneys in the country on our team, I'm not kidding. They geek out on this stuff. They love these spreadsheets. An S-Corp that's worth $5 million that maybe you have a tax basis of $500,000. A lot of times what I hear from a Christian business owner who has been exposed to NCF tools and they've got that $5 million business, what I hear all the time is the phone usually rings when they go, hey, I want to tithe. And my financial advisor said, you should probably do it through a donor advised fund. And they think in their mind, I'm going to sell my $5 million business and I'm going to tithe on the transaction. I'm going to put $500,000 into my donor advised fund. And when I get that phone call, I say, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you were willing to do that. If you're willing to give the 10% after the sale, can I show you what it would look like to give the same percentage of that before the sale that nets your family the same amount, but if you give the business shares in advance, it takes money from the tax bucket that you're going to pay in long-term capital gains, and it actually puts more money in your donor advised fund. They usually say, yeah, show me. I did this with a gentleman last year. This is a real story. I'm going to change the numbers slightly, but a real story. I get a phone call, and the phone rings, and he says, hi, I was referred to you, and I'm selling an arm of my company, and I think it's going to sell for around $20 million, and I want to open a donor advised fund to tithe on the transaction. Like, fantastic. I can help you with that. So I said, if you're willing to give 10% before, can I show you what it would look like to give 10%? Or if you're willing to give 10% after, can I show you what it would look like to give 10% before? So I dial up the gift calculator and I'm showing him what it looks like. And really sharp guy, about 3 minutes into the whole spiel of the value proposition of pre-giving the asset, he says, hang on a second. If I understand you right, for every dollar of profit I'm willing to give up in the sale, the government's going to match it with almost $4 of tax money. I say, you got it. It's a force multiplier. He says, put it to 20%. I showed him 20%. He goes, go to 25%. I showed him 25%. He goes, go to 28%. So he ended up doing a gift of 28% of his company. It takes about a month for the whole thing to work, and he was already talking to some buyers, and what happened was he had to kind of tell them to pump the brakes and slow down because he had another thing going on, and the buyers thought, hand of God, the buyers I think thought that he was getting cold feet, and the bidding started going up against themselves basically, and he ended up selling it for double of what he thought. And if he were standing here, hand of God, he would say, I was trusting God with the whole thing, and he blessed the whole situation more than I could ever fathom or imagine. Now, it doesn't always happen that way, but he ended up with a boatload. It was like $8 or $9 million in his donor advised fund. The story gets better. The money lands on a Thursday. He calls us up and he says, hey, that we'll just call it $8 million. That $8 million that landed in the donor advised fund, I work with this great nonprofit, and I'm actually helping them acquire some commercial real estate that will be a source of evergreen income from them. I'd like to wire them $5 million of it right now. And I'm like, yes, I love this guy. We get the money. It lands in his account at 2:00. He walks a check across the street and closes escrow on $5 million worth of more real estate. And he was so excited that he got to do this for this ministry. Now, I want to give you just a word of caution about that specific kind of instance and my experience of it as somebody who just works with donors who are going through these types of events. That giver was very passionate about that ministry, serves on the board of that ministry. That giver goes to a church in that area, that I had been trying to be in relationship with, and I wanted to help them with their high capacity givers. And I love y'all who work in ministry. I did it for 15 years as a pastor. It's hard to talk to churches about their high capacity givers. There's this guardedness that happens. It's hard to talk to ministries about it because it's the red ocean, right? If I talk to somebody about my giver, they might disappear. And that church had not introduced me to that person who was going through that event. And they didn't get to reap the reward necessarily of that event the way they might have if they had been intentional about the introduction to that giver. I say that because the number one barrier NCF experiences in helping generous Christians is they don't know we exist. It's wild. $3 billion in charitable giving last year, and we are the best kept secret in Christianity besides Jesus. And I want you to feel empowered to talk to your major givers about these tools without having to have all the answers. I'll give you the special sauce. You want the special sauce? If you're taking notes, this is the one you want to write down. Here's the line. I'm not an expert in this, but I know somebody who is. Can I introduce you to Dan from National Christian Foundation? It really is that simple. And a little tongue-in-cheek, right? But the idea is, I want to be an arrow in your quiver to help you serve your donors so that you feel like you can have a conversation with them and they say, donor advice fund, I'm giving this asset, and you're like deer in headlights, and all you have to do is give me a call. I'll be there for breakfast tomorrow. Like, that's my ministry now. And I love what I get to do. I love the impact. Speaking of impact, this is a truth that you know as a director of a ministry. Real impact comes when stories are shared. And that's one of the reasons why Verne is a part of the NCF team. I call him the generosity ambassador for our team. All Verne wants to do is meet people, tell them about Jesus, and tell them about how to be generous, which for him is the same thing. If you know God, you know that God loved the whole world, gave his son for the whole world. God gave first, right? So it's the same thing. And when Verne, this is like real proof in the pudding, I think. When Verne rubs shoulders with donors and tells his story, really good things happen. It's hard to put a number on that of what drips down into the ministry specifically, but I just know when he meets with donors and he tells his story, for the same reason we share testimony, right? It encourages me to want to do the same thing. And so we do our presentation, a version of this, we do it at a Christian business lunch, and we say hi and we introduce them to the tools. And next week I get a phone call and they say, hey, I've been meaning to do something. I need to be more strategic. Help me with my giving. They open a donor advised fund and they put a bunch of stock in it. It happens more often than you'd think. Or somebody hears it and they go, oh my gosh, we did a presentation last Saturday for a ministry, and the people sitting there, it was a very small group, and the three people that were there, one of them says, dang, I know this person who gives to our ministry. Their business transaction closed yesterday. They missed the boat. They missed the window. You know what I hear more than I hear anything else? I wish, from Christian business owners and people who have appreciated assets, I wish I knew about this 10 years ago before I sold my business. I wish I knew. I wish I knew. I wish I knew. That is the biggest hindrance to getting these things accomplished, because I'll tell you what, the force multiplication is real. If you're doing a capital campaign, you can ask people to write checks all you want, or you can ask them to consider giving to God what is already his, that they have sitting on their ledger, not in their checking account. So, what's next? 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on your tax bill. Seriously. I have cards out on the table. This is the part where I just want to plead with you to use me. I worked at a church for 15 years. I loved doing church ministry on Sundays. This is my ministry now. It's the thing that gets me up in the morning, the thing that I get most energized about. I want to help generous Christians be more generous. I want to see more resources get to the kingdom than has ever happened before. And asset-based giving is the way to do it. So in 15 minutes, I can help people save 15% or more on their car insurance. So thank you so much for your time. I'm going to invite Verne back up, and we're just going to see if there's questions that we can answer. They could be questions about Verne and his story. He is an open book. They could be technical questions that you have about asset-based giving or anything else in between. But we would love to see if there's any questions that we can answer for you.